I am ready. Tell
You
me
are.
when.
You may go right ahead. We are live here with Kenning Arlich, and he's going to walk us through some web content accessibility issues and ways that we can make our web content more accessible to people who have various different kinds of challenges in viewing and reading web content. So I'm going to mute myself now because I'm having a hard time talking. Let you take it away, Kenning.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us again today. I hope all of you were able to attend part one, but it's probably not crucial if you didn't. So today we're going to be talking mainly about web content, but I want to do a little bit of a review first. Remember, my mantra here is simplicity, right? You don't have to go for perfection when you're trying to make information accessible. There are some very simple and easy things that you can do, as we looked at last time, that will go a long way toward making your documents and other information accessible. So just a quick review from part one. Remember that I'm sort of pushing this 3-in-1 advantage of accessibility. Of course, we are primarily focused on making content accessible to disabled users, but at the same time that we're doing that, that information is also becoming comprehensible to search engines, and it has the additional benefit of making it really easy to improve the visual design of your documents. So a little bit more review. We talked about the legal imperative for accessibility, starting with the Rehabilitation Act from 1973 and then revised in 1998, and then the Americans with Disabilities Act, and most recently the Office of Civil Rights from the U.S. Department of Education taking an interest in enforcing those acts in terms of the accessibility of information that we all supply to our users. But beyond the legalities, there is, of course, also the ethical imperative for making our information accessible to everyone. It's just the right thing to do. So the second thing we talked about last week was Microsoft Word documents and how it's really easy to use built-in styles as well as design templates to reach accessibility and also make documents look good and be able to change them very easily. Once you have created that style structure in a Word document, it's very easy to change styles globally, and Word has lots of built-in design templates for that, and you can modify or customize to your heart's content as well. And then Word also has an accessibility checker built in that will tell you if there are some outstanding problems with your document. What we did not talk about last time was the fact that Microsoft PowerPoint, and probably pretty much the entire Office suite, has these same features built in. And we're going to look a little bit more at PowerPoint today to see how that works. So then we moved on to PDF documents, which are a very common way of publishing information. And typically what we do is create our documents in Word, and then we save them as PDF within Word or within PowerPoint. And again, if you have created appropriate structure for your Word document and you save it as a PDF, that most of that structure carries through to the PDF. But Acrobat also does have an accessibility checker built in and handy ways of fixing problems very easily, just at the click of a button. And then finally, we talked about file names and date conventions and how it makes a whole lot of sense to replace hyphens in file names with, replace spaces with hyphens in file names. Because if you have a file name that has spaces in it and you load it on a web server, whether it's a Word document or a PDF, the web server will convert those spaces into %20 signs. So you have 3 characters for every space in your file name. There's a % sign, a 2, and a 0. And that can cause frustration, at least for people who are using accessibility technologies like screen readers to read file names. And then I suggested that using an international date format, the ISO standard 8601, for dates in file names was also appropriate, and that's the 4-digit year, hyphen, 2-digit month, and 2-digit day. And that's sort of an international standard where everybody, there's no mix-up about which one is the month and which one is the day. Okay, so.
And I just asked in the chat box, you know, if anyone is actually, since the last webinar, made any changes. And I can tell you that also as follow-up to your last webinar, Marlis did post a bunch of templates for memos and just common communications that we use that are accessible templates. So we got that started. But I'm interested to know if anybody else is what they've done. So I've asked them to just post that in the chat box.
Okay. Yeah, Marlis and I did have an email exchange about this, and I'm really pleased to see that she is putting this these ideas into effect already.
My memo to the commission for their next meeting got sent back to me saying, "Can you put it into the template?" And I said, "Oh, I'd love to." So, so we're definitely making some steps in the right direction.
Great. So today, I'd like to, as I said, talk a little bit about PowerPoint accessibility for presentations. And we'll talk specifically about how to make images accessible, because I think that was a question that came up in the feedback as well. And again, the concept that I'm going to show you in PowerPoint also applies to Word. And then we will also talk about that concept of accessible images for web content. So we're going to go a little bit, we're going to just give a very brief primer of HTML, then talk about images, audio and video, applying accessibility checkers, and then wrap up with error pages that web servers serve and how to make those more accessible. Now, I know that in the plan that Joe sent out, there was also something about accessibility of journals and databases. And I thought about trying to tackle that, and it's really, frankly, beyond my expertise. But I think that after these two presentations, you should be able to at least ask the questions of vendors who are supplying the journals and databases, and asking them if they have made their content accessible, and really asking them to prove it. I don't quite have the expertise on figuring out how to check accessibility of databases and journals, though. And I will also say that this same concept applies to software that we purchase now from vendors. We have to make sure that whatever we buy is also accessible to disabled users. Okay, so let's get right into it. PowerPoint. So when you're using PowerPoint, this is sort of the standard ribbon bar, and as you can see, I have the review ribbon bar selected, and over on the left is a neat little check accessibility button, built right into PowerPoint. So when as you're building your presentation, or once you've finished building your presentation, you can click on this check accessibility button, and what you will get is a little message like this that tells you where errors are occurring on your slides. And mostly what you will get is the fact that you're missing alternative text for your images or for graphics on slides. And as you can see, I've got a bunch of those here. I'm frankly not sure what check reading order is about. That's something I would have to dig into more. And then below this accessibility checker, the one that shows you your errors, is a little more helpful text about why make this fix, and then telling you how to make the fix. So you can see there it says right-click the picture or image, select Edit Alt Text, and then you can either review what PowerPoint has created for you for alt text, or you can edit it as you like. So, show you how that works. Basically, we're talking about a concept called alt text or alternative text. So if I have a photograph like this and I've put it into my PowerPoint presentation or into my Word document, I will either right mouse click, if you're using a Windows machine, right mouse click on that image, or control click if you're using a Macintosh, and you'll get this little sub menu. And you can see I'm selecting Edit Alt Text about halfway down that menu. And that pops up this additional dialog box in PowerPoint. And you can see the tab Alt Text is selected there. And I have chosen to delete what PowerPoint, the text that PowerPoint put in there, which was just something very generic. And I'm putting a very specific description of what's in this image. So therefore, if somebody is reviewing my slides or my Word documents with accessible software, the accessible software will read that caption to them now and say, and tell them at least what is depicted in this photograph. Okay, so it's really pretty simple to make those images accessible in PowerPoint. Do we need to pause for questions? Any questions before we leave?
Just a comment. Chuck was mentioning that the check reading order error that you saw when you did your check is likely the tab order of the text boxes on the page, so that they flow properly.
Yes.
So that makes sense. And I just want to say that not many people have actually been to the McClellan Stafford Ferry, so if that's your photo, congratulations. It's a little out of the way, Kenning.
It's a little bit out of the way. I did it on my motorcycle twice last year.
Oh, I've only done it on a canoe, come through that way. So.
Well, thanks for that, Chuck. That's really helpful.
Oh,
and Jennifer has
kayak passed it. Yeah, it's a quite an interesting
I have a question.
Okay.
Nothing to do with kayaking or anything of that sort.
Right ahead, Marlis.
What do you do if when you click the accessibility checker on any of these formats, it pops up and says that the accessibility checker cannot be run? Is that because it's an old document, or, I mean, I've run across several of those.
Really? I have
in
not
all different formats. I mean, I just tried one on a PowerPoint and it did it. And I don't know whether that's because these are old and we've just been building on them and they're just, or what to think about it.
Let's ask Chuck. I don't know.
and Chuck, go ahead.
Well, it could be the complexity of the document because it has to figure it out to be able to check it. Or the only other thing I could think of is, yeah, it could still be in an older file format and the accessibility checker may be a feature of the newer format. So it may just be a matter of having to save it to a newer format and trying again. I don't know.
Yeah, that's, I'm sure you're right on both of those points, Chuck. When I create PowerPoint presentations, I pretty much stick with the design templates that are built into PowerPoint. And I think that really simplifies things like accessibility checking a lot. If you start drawing a lot of your own boxes and drawing shapes and all kinds of things, it can add to that complexity of the document, as Chuck says, and the accessibility checker may not be that sophisticated yet.
And again, could also be the file format, a PPT versus a PPTX. Yep. There are version differences there that it may not allow certain features in the older style.
Okay.
So the recommendation then is if when I open one of those and I do an accessibility checker, try to save it in a newer format. If it isn't, and then what? If it's already saved in the right one, then do we just have to start from scratch with them?
To make them
'Cause,
accessible,
like I said,
I think you probably would have to take and cut and paste that content into a new document where you start with a template, and yeah, that's retrofitting older documents is going to be a pain, and yeah.
I was surprised how many we ran across with that, so I wanted to
Well,
ask. But
and it's not actually saying that it's not accessible. It's just saying that it can't figure it out, which could be something real simple that, you know, the first error it hits, it just gives up. Meanwhile, somebody with accessibility software, it might not even notice that there's a problem. So, you know, there could be levels of issues there that may or may not be of importance.
I'm going to call Erin Harris up to the table here because, you know, she's sort of my go-to person when I need somebody to, like, look through something on with a screen reader and give me an opinion about how bad it is. And so, you know, do we still have the screen reader, Erin? Jessica?
Hi, Joe and everyone. This is Erin. We don't have the JAWS program anymore.
Okay.
No, we stopped paying for that when we had the budget cuts. So to the best of my knowledge, we don't have a subscription for that anymore, although I do believe that any of us could do a 30-day free trial and then just not sign up after, you know, we try the free trial. So we don't have that at this time.
Bummer. Well, that's something.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the library in Lewis and Clark Library has one. That might be something to reconsider, though. I mean, obviously.
It might. It was nice to have.
Because then, Marlis, you could just pull up the screen reader, put your document into it, and see if it sounds right. You know, that would be the person who's blind, and close your eyes and see if it makes sense to you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's bring that up. I'll mention it to Tracy, and might be something we could look at again now that our budget situation isn't quite as dire, hopefully, this year.
Okay, so let's talk about web content accessibility. And we'll start with a very brief primer, as I said, about HTML, or the hypertext markup language, which is what most documents in the web are written in. And HTML basically tells your browser software how to display text. So any browser software, Firefox, Chrome, and so forth, will be able to read HTML. And assistive technologies typically can also read HTML. So again, it matters how you structure your documents. So HTML is just a series of opening and closing tags that surround text. So the example I'm showing there is the title is Moby Dick, and you establish that with HTML by putting an opening title tag and a closing title tag. And you can see that slash that's consistent in all of the closing title tags. In H1 is the top level header, H2 is a slightly smaller header, H3, it just continues, I don't know how far down, maybe to H7 or H8, something like that. P is a paragraph space, and of course there is an extensive list of tags, and the go-to source, the authoritative source for the current tags in HTML is the World Wide Web Consortium, otherwise known as W3C. And that second link down below is the one that shows the current HTML 5.2 specification for HTML. So when we talk about HTML for accessible images, again, we're using the same concept of alt text as we do in Word or PowerPoint. But because it's HTML, we specify it a little bit differently. So with an opening alt tag and a closing alt tag, and then you put in your caption text in between those. So that's really all you need to do to make an image accessible for HTML. And if you mouse over an image, it should typically pop up the alt text in a little box so you can see that it's there. So accessibility for audio and video is a little bit different. So W3C has both requirements and recommendations. They require transcripts, full transcripts for which is basically the full text of audio or video recordings. If it's a recorded presentation, you'll want that full transcript to be available on your website as well. And these can be either typed by a service or an individual, or created by speech recognition software if we're working from existing analog documents. If you have this already in electronic format, then there's probably usually an easier way to get the full transcript out. And then W3C also recommends captions, and these are basically transcripts or brief transcripts that are synchronized with the video or the audio recording. So those are mostly what's required to make audio and video accessible.
And I'm just going to add in here because this is an area that I kind of end up working in a lot, and even a webinar like this, we've been uploading our videos to Vimeo, the Montana State Library channel on Vimeo, but we also upload them to YouTube. We have a channel on YouTube, and YouTube does have built-in speech-to-text captions and as an option. So these are not perfect captions, but you can get in and edit them. And we have just, in the wake of having previously done not much of anything in terms of captions, we made it our standard procedure that at the very least you upload to both, and so that the YouTube captions are available such as they are.
Yeah.
That's our standard operating procedure. When we're doing video that is created with a little more production, and you have a script, then we ask that you use that script and create captions from the script. So then you have something that's more exact to what's being said on the video and doesn't have misspelled names and odd breaks and stuff. You can position the captions, and you can do that. We have several licenses to video production. Mostly Camtasia is the primary one that we have that people use. And so then it gets loaded into Vimeo with captions. So if anybody has any questions about the way that we can help you at the State Library to get captioned video, because we want captioned video to be an option for all of our videos, just contact me and we can walk through what your options are. That's all I can say about that.
I think what I neglected to say earlier was that most of us don't work with HTML anymore. I mean, at the beginning, when the World Wide Web first came onto the scene, there were many people who were just writing HTML directly in text editors. But now, of course, we have much more sophisticated editors that will create the HTML for you. So if you're using a CMS, for instance, a content management system, and you're creating a document there, you're probably, although you have the option to write the HTML, you're probably just selecting things like title and headers off a point-and-click menu, and it puts the correct tags in for you. Similarly, if you have already created the alt text in a Word document and then you then save that Word document as HTML, that should carry forward as well. So the accessibility should be there. I just wanted you to understand what the underlying structure to this.
And I want to just, I neglected, I didn't see a question come in about the alt text for images. It's a pretty simple question. It's basically, should it be this photo shows or image of? Is there a preference for either of those?
I don't know that there's any specific recommendation there.
So either one is acceptable, and both are better than nothing. It should just, but You are advising just to be as descriptive as you can to a non-visual
but you
person.
also want to be distinct, right? You don't want to run on for several sentences. And in fact, I think Word and PowerPoint tell you to put in 1 or 2 sentences as your caption.
Yeah. Keep it brief.
Question was, are you supposed to leave off the image of? Because I've heard a couple different recommendations where some say you should write image of, or this is a photo of, and others say don't put that in.
Oh, I misunderstood your question. Thanks, Jen.
Yep.
Well, so if you don't put that in, then how would the person whose technology is reading that to them know that it's a photograph?
That's what I have gone by, and that's how I have written them all. And just recently, I read another recommendation that said don't use image of, and so I wanted to clarify, and that was actually internally. It came through our Zoho training, in one of the style guides they had that, for a product that we're using for tickets in SLR, and it says in that recommendation not to use image of. So I was curious.
So did it give a reason?
No, it did not. There's conversation more in the chat box about that, though, I see. So
yeah, Erin is saying, I've noticed that the National Library Service uses image of. Well,
that's good, because that's how I've structured all of my sways, and a lot of my website for the MMP says image of for alt tags. So I've just wanted to make sure I'd been doing that correctly all this time.
And Chuck is saying that he thinks that screen readers tell you where the information is coming from. So if they say alt tag, does the image reader say alt tag for image, or if the image?
It might say something like image and then read off what the alt tag is. I'm not 100% sure, but
that'd be interesting.
I believe.
Yeah, if the screen reader says image of, and then your alt tag says image of, it's going to say image of. That might be a little weird, but so that's probably where the origin of that. I don't know. I don't know. But if the National Library Service uses it, and Erin has another comment here, I think each screen reader announces it differently. I will look into the AP Style Guide to see what their recommendation is. Thank you, Erin.
Yes, thank you.
I would be surprised if a screen reader would know the difference between a screen capture, a photograph, an artwork,
graphic, a chart. Yeah, there's so many. I think it's helpful. I've always written it that way, but I have to admit I never really thought that. Just tagged as image. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about accessibility guidelines and checkers, and this is really just a couple of references. So again, W3C is the authoritative source for accessibility guidelines, not hard to find via Google. And then they also have guidelines for what they call ARIA, or Accessible Rich Internet Applications. And these are associated technologies like JavaScript, for instance, that might be embedded in an HTML page, and how those should be applied as well for accessibility. And then I've also just listed a couple of checkers, website checkers there. So AC Checker and WAVE, which somehow stands for the Web Accessibility Evaluation Tool. I'm not sure how, but we'll look at that one next. So how to apply a checker. So basically, if you just, we're going to look at your website, the State Library website, and you basically just go to that WAVE website, and the first thing you see is a box where you can put in the URL of the website that you want to check. And then it runs, it takes a few seconds to run, and it basically tells you what concerns there are about your website. So you can see over on the left-hand side, it gives you a summary. So it tells you have 13 errors and 15 alerts and a few other things. And then the code over on the right gives you some hint about what's happening. So I've just highlighted one of these over in the middle there. I see I clicked on that little red icon below, and that brought up this dialog box, and it's basically just an alt text that's missing on this image. If we look at the talking book library, we get similar kinds of errors. Most of the stuff will be about missing alt text, but you can see there are also some ARIA messages in there indicating that the standards haven't been followed for embedded technologies. So, whoops, there's another one. Oh, so this one is giving a heading level. And this is characterized as an alert, not an error. See, it's that yellow one. So I think what this is telling is that you somehow went directly from maybe an H2 to an H4 rather than including an H3 somewhere in there. So any questions about the accessibility checker? It's not terrible. I mean, most websites are going to have some level of error, but it's probably a good idea to go through pretty much every page on your website and just run it through the Wave accessibility checker, and most of these things will be easily fixed.
Well, I think the one comment from Erin on the Talking Book Library one is, geez, she'll get that fixed, and then the other comment from Jennifer was, oh boy, as you were going to the state library, we know we have some problems with our webpage, so it's really good to know that there's. I knew there were tools out there. I've never used one, didn't exactly know how they work. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, and there are lots of others. I mean, those are just a few that I put up. And probably Talking Book Library should be your highest priority, right? Because that's the site that's aimed at specifically at disabled users. Okay, and then finally, let's just talk a little bit about error pages. When you're managing web servers, there's always the possibility that you may remove content from the website, and links to that content are still out there somewhere on other people's websites. And so that causes people to click on it, and then they get to your site, and because you've removed the content, it's no longer there, so they get an error message. But there could also be badly formed URLs out there that, maybe somebody typed in a URL rather than copying and pasting it, and that also drives to your website but can't find the exact content because the URL is just incorrect. This is an example of a very unhelpful error page. This is just sort of the standard web server initiated error page that tells a user the page that you're looking for is not on our site, but I'm not going to give you any more help than that, right? And just telling you you're at a dead end. Much more helpful is if you put in some humor and some actual information that can help people. So the one on the left from Fry Wiles, this it's called a 404 error page when the content is not there. It's a little humorous, but then it gives some actual information down at the bottom, some other links that people could click on to try to find what they're looking for. And then from mint.com, similarly, humorous, nicely graphic, but provides some good real links or alternatives where people could go if they reached your website and haven't had their request fulfilled. So I just wanted to point that out, and that's pretty much all I have for you today. We have other questions.
One question was, could you put the Wave URL in the chat box?
Oh yeah, as soon as I find it.
Great. And I think we should nominate Chuck to be our Justin, like the Mint site for Aspen. That would be hilarious. We do have some issues with Aspen links sometimes, so Chuck says, no.
What's Aspen?
Aspen is our new library directory and our e-commerce site. So, and the
So
one we just launched last summer, and we're kind of still building it. So people do. Yeah, people. Yeah, there's some linkage issues within the database, just because we migrated, data from an older, different type of database, and so every once in a while people encounter an error page, and it's not a very helpful error page. It's very helpful to the programmers, but not very helpful to the users.
Yeah.
Last August. We just launched it last August, but there's fewer and fewer error pages all the time. So not getting any other questions? Anyone else?
Can you tell me what an ARIA error is? I don't understand what that means.
So ARIA stands for the Accessible Rich Internet Applications Suite. And basically, there was a time when websites were just plain old HTML, right? They were very simple.
Right.
But now there are a whole lot of other technologies and actual programming built into HTML. All the HTML really does is tell the web browser how to display the content, but it doesn't activate any content. It doesn't allow anybody to interact with the content, and that's what all these other technologies are behind it. But that also creates another whole wave of potential accessibility problems for people with disabilities. And so the ARIA, let's see, where is it there? The W3C Web Accessibility Initiative for ARIA. This is the standards that they want you to use when you use those technologies in your websites.
So like plugins and...
Plugins, yeah.
Okay. Java, embedded video, maybe. I'm trying to think of some examples we have on our websites of stuff like that.
So
that's not like radio buttons, or...
I don't think it's radio buttons. Those are HTML. Those are just HTML. But there's something. There could be something behind the radio buttons, right? That activates some bit of programming or queries a day,
yep.
So forth.
Yep.
Okay. So actions. So you can see what they list on this right in the first paragraph of this page here are things like Ajax, JavaScript, other technologies.
Okay.
Yeah, JavaScript. MMP is horrible.
Yeah.
That's why I'm looking at. I was just curious.
If no one else has any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording, but we'll stick around for a little while in case anybody wants to look at something or maybe practice through this. Or thank you very much, Kenning. Really appreciate it. I think, and I was just going to say, Marlis, I think I'm going to mention to Tracy and Jenny that these recordings would be really good added to people's onboarding requirements, having when they come to work for us and looking through this and being aware of these.
Yeah.
I'll suggest that. And then it looks like we have a little follow-up to do on the screen reader. Chuck has some suggestions, and I'll mention that to Tracy to bring up with the managers, that we probably could use a screen reader just as a library to be able to check our stuff. And as Marlis is discovering, her current version of Word doesn't always work on those older documents. So thanks very much. Got a lot to follow up on.
Thanks, Kenny.
Yeah, you're welcome. Have a great day, everyone.
You too.
Thank you.